I'd love to start this conversation with your brothers telling you that you couldn't be the fat blind kid, because I think that's an incredible place to start. And so, talk about your decision to start wrestling and how that has played such a critical role in your life going forward.
No, absolutely. I think I love that you bring that up. So I was born blind, and like I grew up, in a huge family of like my mom's the second oldest of 13. So I'm the youngest of five, but I'm one of 60 cousins that all grew up in this Monmouth County in New Jersey. And so I grew up like skateboarding, surfing, not really like believing or knowing what blindness was. And I grew up like, just doing all these things. I'd ride bikes until I like started hitting parked cars, and my mom was like, "All right, it's time to stop with the bike." So, I also, aside from that, like I grew up just being a part of like recreational sports, like soccer and things like that. And then once like I got to the point where sports became more serious, I started realizing I couldn't be involved with like passing and things like that, and like real team sports where you're relying on like visual cues and things like that. So I also was going to school in Philadelphia at the time, I from New Jersey to Philadelphia every day, to St. Lucie Day School for the Blind, where I was learning to read and write Braille and do all those things like to integrate into the sighted world and be independent in aspects like that in life. And so towards the end of like, by the time fifth, sixth grade, I started getting home. It would be like 4:30. I started getting a little lazy and watching like TV from like 2 inches away and like just eating junk food and not doing much. And my brothers were both really active. My two older brothers, Oliver and John. Like John was a state champion soccer player. Oliver took fifth in the state for wrestling. And I looked up to them a lot, and they were like, "Ant, come on, man." Like by seventh grade, I transferred to the public school in my town. So it was like no excuses anymore. So they're like, "Ant, you got to do something, man. Like you're blind, but you can't be fat and blind. Like, cause you can do something about being like overweight. So
Hmm.
I took that as like a challenge. And like, first of all, I'm like, screw you guys, you know what I'm saying? This is messed up. And like you guys are brutal. But it was almost like I took it as a challenge, and I'm like, fine, let's do this. And I looked up to my brother Oliver a lot, and I'm like, what can I do wrestling? Like I could wrestle, because there was this blind guy named Brandon Scott who wrestled in New Jersey, and I really looked up to him when I was young, seeing like him wrestle, and at the time my brother, and I was like, all right, there's a way I can do that. And so I started. I went to the public school wrestling practice, like the recreational team after school program, and started wrestling in seventh grade. And when I wrestle sighted kids, I'm the only blind person wrestling, so I had to stay in contact constantly. So like they call it two-hand start, where you're start off two-hand contact, and then like if there's a full separation in the movement, then and we're far away from each other and I have no idea where you are, then we have to, the referee blows the whistle and brings us back to the center. So I was, my seventh grade year, I was terrible. I went like 2 or 3 and 12, and like two of my wins were forfeits where you just go and get your hand raised. And like I remember the last match of seventh grade, I was like, Dad, I need to get good at this. Like, I don't want to be just some joke, like blind wrestler, mediocre, whatever. I want to get good. And he's like, all right, Ant, like, let's find a club. And he found me a wrestling club where I started going 4 nights a week. This guy, Mike Melanconico at Rhino, is the best guy to come, one of the best people to come in my life, because he showed me hard work. He worked with me as a blind wrestler, like, showing me moves, techniques, different things like that. And I was working so hard, like 4 nights a week. I'd go to a tournament every weekend with my dad around like the tri-state area to try and go find the best tournaments. And I was getting my butt like kicked so bad. Like
Mm.
I wouldn't even score a point at these tournaments. And I remember like leaving one tournament and I was like, oh man, I don't know if this is like for me, like I'm getting destroyed. And finally I like changed my goal to winning. Instead of winning a match, like let me score some points. And then I started scoring points, and that got me motivated. And then I started winning matches, and the whole, like, you start to turn this corner right when you think it's like you're never going to get better because you can't see your slow progress because you're in the middle of it. When you turn that corner, it starts to show you, you're like, oh man, this is working. Like my hard work
Mm.
and all these hours like aren't for nothing. And then eighth grade comes around, I end up going 23-1 and like winning the entire championship and all that stuff.
Incredible. And so, what I want to highlight there is why you decided to get so serious about it. You could have easily taken the road of saying, this isn't for me. I'm not good at this. But instead, you wanted to double down and get better. Where did that desire come from?
I think it came from, I just fell in love with the process, like the training. I remember coming home from a practice and being like, dude, I got pit stains. Like I never had pit stains before in my life. Like I'm working hard, and like this feeling of like I would work so hard that like this, some nights it'd be hard to get up to like get out of the room because I worked that hard. And those were my favorite nights. And it's just like that feeling of putting your all into something. Like my dad will always say, whenever I get into something, I'm like fully in, like I'm all in, and I basically absorb it. Like almost everything I'm passionate about in my life. Like I'm also a musician. I play guitar, and like with that, I started playing it when I was like 18 years old, and I didn't even know what rhythm was. Like I was terrible, and I was just so passionate about it. My dad called me stone hands. My family wouldn't let me practice in the same room as them, but I was just so passionate about it, and I loved like this climbing this mountain where you have all this like room to grow, and like the growth is never ending. So like just diving into that full force and seeing like reaping the benefits of it is really, it's rewarding. And it's not so much the wins that I enjoy. It's like I said, it's like those practices where you just literally put your all into it, like you have nothing left and you're working hard.
Yeah. And that's something that everyone, all of your teammates at least, talked about in A Shot in the Dark. They talked about in the movie about how you were the hardest worker and you were working as hard as anybody. And so, where does the desire to get better, the desire to push yourself, the desire to focus on the process come from?
You know, I think it comes from a little bit of like an insecurity of being blind, that I have to catch up with everyone else, because I always try to like hide my blindness in the beginning of my life growing up, just trying to like not use my cane to get around. I looked like an idiot sometimes, like, but I just did it because I was almost embarrassed. Like I wanted to be like everyone else. And so in order to be like everyone else, I had to work that much harder to catch up, because I had a little bit of a learning curve, you'd say, like being blind or something. But I had to figure out different ways to get around that and keep moving forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what happened, interestingly, in the movie was like, you know, the most heartbreaking part about it was the critics and the people who were just talking poorly about you, you were just trying your best in the moment to do as best you could. So how did you emotionally deal with parents believing you didn't belong and the haters? And it was
Oh,
hard for
man.
me to watch.
I, what's funny, as you say this, it's coming back into my life now. I used to have people not believe I was blind and think I was just trying to get an unfair advantage because
Crazy.
we like, decent at this sport. And even in eighth grade, at my championship match, I was losing 13-3 with like 30 seconds left or 45 seconds left. And we're on our feet. And I end up throwing the kid to his back, and just my my dad taught me, he's like, never give up till the end, you never give up. And so I take that with me, and it's like, also my mom is like, she's one of the toughest people in my life, like in the best way possible, like raised me in, to be independent and never give up. And that kind of just translates over to everything I do. And when I won, I end up winning. I throw this kid to his back and pin him. The crowd goes crazy. I'm like 13 years old, man. I'm so pumped, like, but like not really showing it like that. I was always humble. Every time I won, I never like jumped or like, did anything like that flashy. And I remember leaving the mat. I just won like the whole championship in eighth grade. I'm so excited. The dad comes over to my dad and says, your son doesn't belong in this sport. It's unfair to my kid that he has to stay in constant contact. It's an unfair advantage. He should go into the Special Olympics. He should try some other sport. He does not belong here. And it was like, I remember being 13 years old and being like, how could you like take away all this hours and hard work that I put into something and discredit it all to being an unfair advantage where we only have to stay in contact because I can't see you if we're not in contact. Trust me, I'd give you everything I could, everything I have in my life to be on the other end where I have to stay in contact with the blind kid and I'm the sighted person. You know, it's like I understand that it could change, you know, because like it could change someone's style a little bit because people in high school and things like that are used to like wrestling like far away from each other. But if you study like any high level wrestling, it's like they're always in constant contact and you always have to be in hand fighting and like constantly going. And it was just like I remember being so pissed off, man. Like my dad, like I learned in that moment, like we really need to forgive people. Like a little later on, obviously, like after I was able to cool off. But there's always going to be these like ignorant people in our lives, and we just have to keep going. And it was just crazy. And
How
so
did
those haters, I got to a point where we were just like laughing at them later on in high school. But like in the beginning, man, like that stuff used to really irritate me. Like I have good hearing. So like during matches, like coaches would say things that they know I could hear, but they would indirectly say it to me. And then it would get in my head and like I would kind of like freak out or lash out. And I had a little bit of a temper because I was like young and immature and like, you know, I'm dealing with all these extra emotions and growing up like teenager. And it was so much looking back, like it was so much to deal with that. Like all I wanted to do was wrestle, you know, and I deal with so much politics.
how did you and your family talk about those situations where you had to deal with people? What advice did you get from your parents or family in general or your
They
coaches?
always said like, you know, you just have to laugh at it. Like you can't take this stuff to heart. There's gonna be people like that in your life all the time. Like my family's very tough. Like we, you know, we've been through a lot, and we're all close, and they've really been a help in my life through those times. But I'll tell you, like, there's been times where I almost thought I couldn't handle it, and just being that young, you know, like looking back at it, like you're at such a growing period in your life and like such an absorbing time where you're so influenced by the people around you and you have these like people saying all these like hateful things to you. But then, you know, one thing that really helped me get through that as well is like for every like hateful comment, there's like 100 positive ones, you know, so you can't focus on the hateful ones.
One of the big parts of the movie was, you know, how the school, the Catholic, what was the CSA? What is
Uh,
the abbreviation?
CBA, yeah.
CBA? Yeah, how Christian Brothers Academy, how they denied you and they accepted you first and then they said no, you can't come. And that was a real that was hard for me to watch as well. How did you deal with that?
Oh man, I actually will never forget that day. So in seventh grade, I had a handwritten letter of acceptance. It's the school both my older brothers went to. My brother, you know, was on the wrestling team, did so well. My brother John was on the soccer team, state champion soccer team. And I had a handwritten letter of acceptance. They were getting my books brailled. Everything was in the process. I'm so excited. I have like the CBA wrestling sweatshirt. Like I'm all pumped, you know?
Mhm.
And eighth grade comes around. I'll never forget because I lost to this kid in seventh grade. And I remember like wanting to train to beat this kid. Like it was just one of these kids on my list for eighth grade that like I needed to beat, you know, like to know I got better. And I'll never forget. It was a home match and I beat him and I beat him bad. Like I beat him really good. And uh, I remember getting off that mat, like the match after walking off the mat and the match is over. I go over to my parents and they're so upset. They had just gotten from the meeting. They had received like a letter and a phone call saying I'm no longer accepted to the school. The president had passed away and they said I'm no longer accepted. I won't fit into the environment or the culture and all these things. And my parents had a meeting with the board and you know, people always say like, well, why didn't you sue? Why didn't you do this stuff? And my dad's a lawyer, so like that option was there, like obviously whatever, but we're not those type of people. And you know, my dad says it best, where we're not going to go somewhere we're not wanted. Like they would totally like, you know, make sure I didn't succeed or something, not give me the right tools and just not be, you know, helpful. And it wouldn't have been the right environment. So it's like these things happen in your life to redirect you to better places, really.
Yeah, so let's talk about those better places. And you end up going to a new school, and the coach is highlighted in the movie, and a fiery character. He's awesome. And
He's
talk
the
about
man.
you talk about your relationship with your new coach at the high school and how that impacted you.
So yeah, so it went totally 360, like 180, whatever you want to call it. I go from going to this place I'm not wanted to going. I get a phone call, and it's this guy, Coach Smith, Pat Smith from St. John Vianney, and he's really interested in me. And you know, he's sounds all excited, and he goes, you know, brings me to the school, gives me the tour. I'm like, it's a new environment where I'm actually like wanted. And like being in a private school, you have to go around some loops to like get being a person so-called disabled, like to get in that school, to get the accommodations. But he fought really hard, as well as my parents, and they eventually like got the school to welcome me with open arms. And it was just incredible. Like you know, the experience there was, I can only imagine, tenfold better than what it would have been at CBA.
Yeah, how were friends and stuff like that? Was it new friends that you had to make? Was it a new environment from that perspective? Did you
Yes,
know people going in?
I didn't know a single person. And you know, it's funny, my my wrestling coach, he was also the religion teacher. And there was this thing called Christian service that the seniors had to do for like extra community hours or whatever to graduate. And he developed a whole thing for where there were people brailing my stuff. And so you would type in the computer and it would translate into an embosser in braille. And so I would have these things in braille, like handouts and stuff. So he had a group for that. And then he literally had a group. I'm there at the first day of school, and I'm all nervous, like, you know, how am I going to find my next class? I'm still like young and immature with my blindness, like trying to hide it a little bit and not fully accepting it. And I was sitting at class, and there's like 5 minutes left, and there's a knock on the door, and it's like two like beautiful sounding ladies, you know, like senior girls. And they're like, "Hi, yeah, we're here to pick up Anthony Ferraro to bring him to his next class." And I was just like, "Oh man, like, you know, I can get used to this. This is pretty cool." It just felt, he made me feel like very welcome, and like almost just, I don't know, it's really interesting. But I was scared, I was nervous, like I didn't know a single person, and I'm the only blind person in this entire school. And have these people even ever seen a blind person before, and whatever, you know, like there's so many stigmas that come with it that aren't even true. And it's just like, you know, I made the friends I did, and I was like that type of person that, you know, people have their cliques so that they kind of stay with. And I was that person that like, well, why do you have to stay with a clique? I kind of bounced around to everyone and talked to everyone and said what's up to everyone, and like just like to socialize and connect, you know.
Mm. What advice would you give to someone who's entering a new environment for the first time and feels isolated or alone?
I would my best advice would be, you're not the only person feeling that in that environment, even if you think you are. And you know, reaching out to someone, just saying hello to someone, you know, asking them how their day is, or what they're into, what they're interested in. Like you never know where that leads and who that person becomes in your life. So just
Yeah, that
really, you know, being social, and not trying to like hide in a bubble, and create some like little nook for yourself, you know.
yeah, was that something that came naturally to you, or was it something that you developed later on?
I don't know about that. I think it just happens. Like I got thrown in these situations. Like my dad always said, like, I don't know if you were just like, if you're stupid or you just have the biggest balls in the world. And like you know, literally just do things like, you know, not even thinking about it. And like, why not? Like you never know until you try, type of thing. So it's really just that I love being spontaneous. I love just, you know, being in the moment and just trying to try whatever, you know. I love it. Trying to
What's
live
an ex-
life as much as possible.
Yeah, I love it, man. What's an example of you Either being stupid or having the biggest balls in the world.
So like for example, I started like I mentioned, I started playing guitar when I was 18, and by the time I was like 19, I was already, had a guy that was I was playing like shows around the area, and like I didn't know how to sing. I didn't even know how to play a full song yet, but I was just putting these, like, I never wrote down a set list in my life to this day. And everything flows. It's all spontaneous, and I just do it. And then, you know, like even I'll play so many cover songs, but so many people are like, I'll never play the solo for the cover song. I'll play like my solo. I'll play my rhythm to it. Like I'll interpret things in my way and just kind of make it my own. And it's just like, I don't know. I just love that, you know?
Yeah, just always willing to put yourself out there and just try things.
Yeah. And it's not even like I love like attention, maybe
Mhm.
part of me does, like I'm sure a lot of us do, but like I love that it's almost like a thrill, like just trying that like one time we were in New York City, and me and my fiance were in New York City, and we're dating for like maybe a year at this point, and we're in Union Station right outside of it, and there's this, like, also it's nighttime, we're going to take the subway, but we're outside, and there's this boombox playing with these like rap beats, and then all of a sudden there's this like circle of like, it's what they call a cipher, where they're all freestyling, and they're going around in a circle, literally just freestyling, like, people who are obviously like very good at freestyling. And I stood there for a half hour just in amazement, and the whole time like, I gotta get in this, like I gotta get. And I'm standing there with my cane, and like we're just standing there. I'm like, yo, can I jump in? Like, and my girl was like, yo, you're crazy. And I just did it, and like ended up like, it was just so spontaneous, and I ended up doing so well in it that they were like, oh, like go again, and like they reposted it on their like stuff. It was just so funny, like I never done that before, but it was just like I felt the need to jump in and do that, and I loved it.
How do we convince the world to have more spontaneity in their life and to just be willing to try new things?
I don't know, man. There's so many people that sit home and just want to make excuses and complain. And the first step is to just get out and like, get out of your comfort zone, whatever it may be. If you don't go to the coffee shop down the street, or you don't like going to get your groceries, like trying to go do that one time, like get out of your comfort zone, whatever it is. Like I'm constantly trying to be uncomfortable, like in that sense, because I feel like we're always learning when we're in our, out of our comfort zone. And how are we going to grow if we're just used to what we're used to? And, just trying new things, you never know what's going to come out of it.
Yeah, one of the ways you were outside of your comfort zone, at least it seemed like in the movie, was the workouts. The workouts were, it seemed like they were brutal and you were willing to work harder. Take us through one of those workouts. What do you do? You're going hard, and I'd love for you to break that down, exactly what types of things you did.
Yeah. So, it started out like just wrestling, and then I wanted to get better. So Mike, who I mentioned earlier, Melanconico, he introduced me to strength training, and I started doing strength training with not your conventional, like, sit at the bench and lift for like 3 hours, whatever. It was, you go in for 45 minutes and you have a set routine where it's like, I'm doing 20 of these, 20 of these, 20 of these, 3 rounds, and then, three more rounds of another one, of another circuit. I would usually do like 3 circuits and 3 rounds of each. So it was like I would try to simulate like a tournament, like a wrestling tournament, like, okay, first match, and then like, all right, so,
Mm.
quarterfinals, and then try to like make it realistic. And I fell so in love with that. Like I said, I love that feeling of just like, almost like where you're next to being broken, where you're like, but you're doing it to yourself in a positive way, and there's growth to come out of it. And when I work like that, it's like my routine, a lot of pull-ups, a lot of body work, weight stuff, a lot of kettlebell stuff. I still train like that today. Like the only difference is it's probably just getting a lot harder. I'm still going harder too. And like I'm like, I have a prison set up in my back of my apartment, like outside. I literally have like a rusty rusty barbell with some weights on it. I have like a couple like 2 kettlebells and dumbbell, and then like a Bosu ball and a slam ball. And like literally, like I'll just find a freaking heavy rock if I'm somewhere and carry that for as long as I can. Like any way to work out and like feel active. And just there was, I remember this time I thought he was crazy. Mike introduced this thing to our wrestling club called a lock-in. And what it was I was in the first one, and I'll never forget what I like. You go to the wrestling club and you're there for 24 hours, and he feeds you and stuff at the proper times, whatever. You bring your snacks too, and you're there for 24 hours. Each hour there's a different workout at the top of every hour, and it could take from anywhere from like 10 to 30 minutes, whatever, anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes, however you push yourself, and you get the rest of the hour to recover. And there's 24 hours of it. And I remember like going through that at 2 in the morning. It's amazing what your body does. Like your mind will shut off and your body will just perform. Like it's insane. I remember at 2 in the morning, I'm literally sleeping against the wall in the wrestling room on the mat. And Mike wakes me up and he's like, all right, all you have to do right now is 50 pull-ups. I was like, all right. And I remember just literally sleepwalking to the pull-up bar, jumping up, banging out. I've never done this in my life. Banging out like 50 pull-ups in one clip and just going right back on the floor to sleep. And I was just like, wow, you could do anything. Like, finishing that 24-hour lock-in, like that's insanity. Like looking back to that, I'm like, I could really do anything in the world after doing that,
Yeah, and it's sometimes when you push yourself, do you realize, oh wow, I could go so much further than I thought I could go. And
even today, like I was on the floor doing like V-ups with weights in my hand, and I'm like, all right, you have to do 100. And I'm like going so slow. And I'm like, what the hell is wrong with you? And then I just like kicked into this gear that I forgot that I know. And it like opened the whole new world. Oh, wow. I'm supposed to be going so much harder than I've been going right now. And then you just get into this like whole new mindset of like, you were just going so lazy because you were letting yourself. And like, we're capable of so much more than we even like imagine. It's crazy.
what do you do when you catch yourself getting lazy? Maybe not even a workout, but just in general in life. Like, where does your self-talk go? How do you convince yourself to start going harder again?
I think it stems back to that 7th grade self where my brothers were like, you can't be fat and blind. Like when I start feeling myself getting soft or, just not feeling like it immediately affects my mental health. Like not just being lazy, that affects my mental health and in a bad way. And working out is like it's the biggest antidepressant in the world. Like I think we could almost all agree with that. And it just, when you're not feeling right, you have to assess the situation. Okay, am I eating right? Because that's a big factor. Am I working out? Because that's huge. And even if you're not like there was a time in the pandemic where there was like 3 days went by and I was like, I don't even think I left the house. Like I'm going insane. And then I had to work out, and it was like so much comes out of that.
You mentioned the pandemic, and so I'm curious how that has affected your life. This is, we're going on now a year in the pandemic kind of. So how has that changed your outlook on life, if at all, and your day to day?
Yeah, so a lot. At first, I was living in Brooklyn with she was my girlfriend at the time, now fiance. We were living in Brooklyn, and I was training nonstop for the Paralympics. I was #1 in the country, top like 20 something in the world at the current moment back then, and nonstop training. I'm breathing judo. I'm waking up, walking to the gym down the street, getting the most intense workouts of my life from this guy Lenny, who was like putting me through these like Marine like boxer fighter workouts where he would almost like be like one time I'm working out and he would like challenge me and like he'd be like, all right, go do 500 sit-ups, come right back. And like I would do it, like, no problem. Like, I would just, because this guy told me to, and I'm like, all right, I'm supposed to do this, and people be looking like this guy's insane. And then one time, like, he has this circuit where it's like pull-ups, V-ups with the on the bar, all these different crazy workouts, and it's like 20 of each. And he's like, all right, do 20 rounds. And I'm like, Lenny, you're freaking crazy, man. Like and I'm like, all right, like in my mind, I'm like, all right, but I'm gonna do 20 rounds. So I get to round 16, I can't even move anymore. And I'm like literally, I'm that point of shaking where you think you're gonna pass out. And I'm like, yo, Lenny, like I can't do anymore, man. And he's like, I was like, I did 16. And he was like, bro, most anyone did was 4. I was just like seeing what he would do. And I was like, oh my God, like, and a part of that was also like, another reason why I think I worked so hard too was being blind in the room. I think everyone around me is working harder than me. And
Wow.
I think no one I didn't even know until like halfway through high school that like people took breaks like in the room. Like, like even just to like they'll walk in a quick like circle, a small circle just to like get their breath for a second and then go back into it. And like they'll kids will just be like dancing around, like just kind of like not really working as hard. People hated going with me because I go 100% like all the time. Like I think everyone around me is going nonstop, and I think if I take a break, I'm going to be noticed right away, the first person, because no one else is doing that. So why would I? So there's this like mental thing in my head where you have to go as hard as possible. Like you can't stop. And it's like people have been like blown away sometimes with my work ethic when I'm in like full blown work mode. But to me, it's like, am I working hard enough? Like, am I working as hard as the next? Because I don't have those visual cues either. So like, I'm constantly going, and like almost to the point where people are like, dude, you're crazy. And with the pandemic, like I said, everything's judo and working out. Also motivational speaking and music to like make money on the side to fund my Paralympic journey. And I all of a sudden COVID hits, right? And like everything stops, everything's shut down. There's no future of anything right at the moment. And we leave Brooklyn, we go to this, her parents had a cabin in upstate New York. So we go there to get some space and like try to figure out what our next move is. And the whole time we're up there, I bring some stuff to work out with, like some weights and stuff, and just do like, my CrossFit style workouts. And I'm going hard every day, like constantly going hard, like I'm training for the Olympics. And there's nothing in the future. And I'm finally getting to this point, like 2 months go by, and I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Like, this is really hard to try and train like this with no, because you're not just training like, all right, I'll just do like today I'll do a light workout. It's like, no, I'm training for the Olympics, so I have to train hard. And it's like next level of training. Like, I'd be fine if I was training just regularly. And so in my mind, I'm thinking Olympics. And finally I'm to the point where it's like, this is getting so hard. I don't even know what the future is. And I called it my friend Corey, and I'm like, yo, like he's, a big influence. He's a good dude, like a great trainer and stuff like that. And I call him like, dude, I don't know, like I want to take like a break, dude. Like my body's so exhausted. My mind is like, almost can't deal with this. And he's like, yo, what are you doing? You got to take some days off. Like, not okay. He's like, you need recovery. Like, you need this, and all this shit hit me. And I'm just like, dude, I'm not like, that is what I needed to hear, man. Like, I need to know that it was okay to stop for a sec. Like, it's okay to take like a step back, like just pause for a minute. And you're not like, it's okay. Like that was the main message, and that hit me so hard. But it was almost like once I told him, like, believed it was okay, it was almost like dealing with a loss, because this was my life, and like that's all I knew. I still loved working out, so I'd still do that. But like the judo was my life at this current moment. And I was just like almost mourning this loss, like being almost a baby about it. And finally my fiance's like, you know, you should focus more on your music. And like I had that in my mind. Like I was like, I do want to focus more on my music. So I just started like, so then we end up, you know, moving from Brooklyn. We found an apartment in Spring Lake and get an apartment like a couple blocks from the beach where I grew up, actually. So same town where I grew up, and like all my family's here. And we get engaged, and then I start like playing around here. Like I play at restaurants and bars and stuff like that. And I was playing outside at a lot of places, and even playing on the side of the street for people and like getting tips, all to make money, you know. And finally, I was making like a full-time career out of it. Like I'm making a lot of money, doing well, and have a lot of jobs booked. And then all of a sudden, I'm sitting at home and like this pandemic like sucks, you know. Like I want more out of it. Like I want to make a mark. Like so I was sitting home, and it's like coming close to election time, and all social media is like garbage. Like everyone's just fighting with people. People are like unfollowing people. People are like saying mean things to people that are their friends. Like all this stuff, like all this just, you know, separation, and just like it was so toxic. I felt it like sitting home. I felt like I'm not a political person. I just felt like my heart. I was like, dude, this country right now, like it's not okay. And I was like, what can I do to make my mark right now? And my fiance works in tech, so she can work from wherever. And you know, when I was traveling for the tournaments for judo, like we go to, you know, a country like Azerbaijan. I'd have a world championship, and then we go travel around the country for like 2 weeks and explore and learn so much. And so we're like, we love traveling. We can't travel right now, like out of the country. I love playing music. That's the one way I find that I was like making people happy through all this, like giving them some normalcy and stuff. So I was like, you know, what can we do? And we were brainstorming, and we came up with this idea to go. We did a 10,000 mile, 7 week cross country road trip, setting up in, you know, beautiful places across the country, like the Grand Canyon, Telluride, all these places. The first day was election day, the in front of the White House in like the Freedom Square, and with the White House in the background on election day. And like we did this tour, you know, and just live streamed, calling it Anthony Ferraro's blind busking tour. Like busking is where you set up on the side of the street or wherever and play for tips, you know. So I was doing it, but live streaming it as well, and playing more in like scenic places. So people at home, sitting home, can't get out of their houses, you know, could almost feel like they were there and enjoy this live music. And got like a very good response from it. It was just like a beautiful trip that happened, and you know, almost like a post-engagement trip, but trying to make a mark during COVID and just spread as much positivity as possible. And it was incredible.
So how did you like start to like get this going? Like it was, you just started going across the country? Like
It
how did
was
that
so,
work?
it took a lot of planning. Kelly is incredible, my fiance, at planning. We wrote a lot of stuff down. You know, we kind of made a map of where we wanted to go and what places. And her sister at the time is pregnant, so we wanted to visit her in Northern California. So we're like, all right, let's make it around that. So like, you know, we did this like figure eight in the country, and wrote it out on a map. Logistically did the dates, how long we'd stay in each place, and then, you know, booked like maybe 4 places in advance, but that's about it. And then just almost winged the rest of it. Like we had each place we set up, we kind of, you know, felt the vibe of each area, and then felt what felt right, and then set up there. And we did it all through Facebook, but now we're currently putting it all through YouTube, all the videos that we collected from that. And
Mhm.
then we're also recapping it all on Instagram right now too. And it's just been like, it was insane. Like it was almost like I said, it's like you don't know until you try. And so many ideas came out of it, so many things. Like we freaking the first so we go to DC, and then next stop's Asheville, North Carolina. And we get to Asheville, and we get to Asheville, the car breaks down.
Wow.
And I don't mean break down, like I mean every light comes on in the car, like
Oh my
check
God.
engine, the brake light, everything. And we bring it to the dealership, and they're like, "You can get this back to Jersey, but you can't go 10,000 miles with this." And we were like, no, we need to go 10,000 miles. Like, we're not going back. Like, we're doing this. We set out to do this and we're doing this. And we ended up trading in that day. We traded the car in for whatever we could get it for, bought a new Subaru, and just like, a safer car, like a future car for like a family and stuff, and just made this investment and went on with our trip. Didn't let these things stop us. Like, so many things happened where, people were, so many great things and so many like things out of the moment. And it was just like, we did a podcast during it where we were just like, all right, let's just record like talking about the last stop and then talking about the next stop, what we're excited about, while we're driving to the next spot. And it was just like, anywhere from like 10 to 40-minute talks of us talking about each place and trying to give people you know like what the country was like during COVID from a firsthand view.
Mm. And you drove actually, right? During
Yes,
this trip?
I did drive at one point. So one of the plans was to go to the salt flats in Utah. And after Park City, we set out to the salt flats, and we had no idea. Like, we didn't look too much up. We were like, oh man, like it could be closed because of the weather. We had no idea like if you're allowed to just pull off and drive. We just were like gonna wing it. We get there and like we get on the side. Kelly gets out and checks it, and she's like, all right, we're good. And we like get on the salt flats. We switch. I've never driven, like I've driven a little bit where she showed me how to drive while she's steering and stuff, and just to like get used to the gas and stuff like that. And I've never had an experience where I got to like sit in the driver's seat and just drive. And we get on the salt flats and we switch seats, and I'm sitting in the driver's seat and I'm like slowly going, and she's like, all right, go wherever. And I'm like, wait, what? I was like, are we on them? And she's like, yeah. And then all of a sudden, like in the video, you just hear the car like floor. And I'm like, I just hit the gas so hard. And I'm like so free at this point. Like, I've never felt like any of my worries, grief, anxiety, anything like just didn't exist at that moment. I had like the biggest smile on my face. I'm screaming freedom. Kelly's freaking out. And I'm like, yo, why are you freaking out? She's like, normal people do not drive this fast. So I like slowed down, and like it was just like this amazing experience. And then we stayed there for like 2 hours. She like got out of the car, put Bluetooth, like called the car on Bluetooth, and then was directing me while I was driving alone. And
Oh
like
my God.
I had all these like I was just screaming. I literally not looking out the front window. Like, I'm looking out the side window, with like my head out the window while I'm driving. And like I was like, I never got to do this before because I'm from Jersey, and like, there's angry drivers. So like I literally stuck my middle finger out. There's no one around. I stuck my middle finger out the window. I'm like, get the fuck out of the road, like, I was like honking my horn and stuff. Oh, it was amazing.
That's great. Are there any moments other than that you can recall in your life where you just felt such joy and such freedom and such love, like it seems like you felt in that moment?
Oh man, that's one of the top moments of my life, other than getting engaged. But like that, I'm trying to think like that. I think one of those moments could be two of those moments. One time after my senior year of high school, I did an article for ESPN, and someone reached out to me who was this blind guy named Eric Weinmayer who climbed Mount Everest. First blind guy to ever do it. First blind guy to climb all 7 largest summits in each continent. And he reached out to me saying he loved my story. Asked me if I would consider going with this group to hike in Peru up 16,000 feet for 4 days, and going to experience this trail that's like a very remote trail called the Loris Trek. It's very strenuous. And I was like, I've never hiked before. Hell yeah. Like normally people start out with like the bunny trails, but like I was like, let's do this, and like I remember hiking that journey and just feeling like you couldn't worry about anything else because you're looking at death like the whole time almost. Like there's times where there's like 6,000 foot drop offs and you're scaling this wall and you're like, all right, I just have to be present now, like each footstep, like, and you just learn so much on that journey. And I think I was just, and also, a year later, I did with a similar group through him. I did a whitewater rafting trip, 90 miles down the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon. And that was just, there was a moment where I I got to play guitar like in the Grand Canyon and in like a cave, and it was the most incredible experience. So actually, I will say every time I play guitar, especially like if I have a band and I'm playing electric and the band's playing behind me and I get to just throw my head back and like play guitar, I'm just transformed into this moment where being blind doesn't matter, nothing matters, and I'm just
Mm.
like I'm speaking through my guitar. Every emotion I have is like coming out of this guitar, and it just feels like sometimes I'll be playing guitar and someone will be trying to talk to me even I'm not there. And like sometimes I'll play a song, I'll come back and I'll be like, oh, like what happened, And it's an unreal experience.
That's so beautiful, man. And it reminds me, it makes me think of the idea that music is a universal language that we all can understand. And do you feel that as well?
I cannot say it better. Like that, that's something I say. Everyone in the world can relate to music in some way. Like I'd like to find a person where some frequency does not affect their emotion.
Mm. What do you mean by that? Expand on that a little bit.
Like, so, the blues, for example, like that speaks to me. Like, the blues, when you're having a bad day, the blues helps, when you're having a good day, the blues can even help. Like, it's a feeling. Like, music is totally a feeling, it's an emotion. And each frequency, for even if you're deaf, like you feel these frequencies, and these frequencies, like from whatever instrument might grab you, whatever sound, like it affects your mood, your emotions. Like songs can make you sad, songs can make you happy, songs, it's even if you're like a emotionless person, man, like you feel something from sound, from frequency, like that sound brings.
Mm.
Because especially being blind, like I absorb myself, like I love sounds. Like it's just I don't know, it's, oh man, it's like a amusement park.
What are your favorite sounds other than the blues?
I love, horns, like trumpets, saxophones. I just love music. I love the sound of my Perkins Braille writer. It's like this old Braille
Mm.
machine. And like it's like a typewriter almost, in sense of like the old school typewriters, and but it has 6 keys for Braille, and you're typing on it. It's these pins and things are pushing down into the paper and making these noises, and like, and then at the end when you're about to like, before you hit the end of the page, the bell will ding, so to bring the receiver back to the beginning of the page and go down a line. It's just like the sound is so soothing.
Why do you think you enjoy that so much?
Probably because I've been, it's a tool I've used a lot of my life, and
Mm.
it's almost like it brings you like, I think sometimes people can like even pictures, it brings you back to a certain time in your life, and like a sound can do the same. Like that sound brings me back to learning Braille, like typing Braille. Like I remember
Mm.
all those things, being in Philly, like all these things being exposed to.
Wow, that's
I,
really
lo-
interesting.
I love the sound of rain too, like thunderstorms. That's like one of my favorite sounds also.
I love it, man. That's actually so cool to think about that, sounds can also relate strongly to different periods in your life. I'm going to stick with that and think about that a little more and think about what sounds I relate to which parts of my life.
Also,
So,
I've never gotten to think like it about it like that too, so I'm glad you asked.
yeah. So, one thing I want to talk to you about is one thing you're really proud of, which was winning the Sportsmanship Award in high school. And talk to me about what that meant to you after um, just your experience in high school.
you know, that sportsmanship award to me at the time meant more than any like state title, any championship, any win, because it was a win for me in the sense of I dealt with a lot of, you know, people, those haters, like people just not believing I was blind, saying I had an unfair advantage, like not believing I was as good as I like showed to be, like all these like doubters and everything. And uh I'm sorry. I just had a brain fart so bad.
You're good. No worries.
Well, what was the main question?
Sportsmanship award.
Oh yeah, sport. Okay. No, so this sportsmanship award was after dealing with all those things, and like I created like a temper almost at a young age from it, because I was like angry. Like I hated being blind at that time in my life. I hated dealing with all that shit. Like I hated that I had to do it. Like I just want to be a normal kid. So I was angry, you know? And people knew I had a temper, especially coaches, is when I was younger. So they would try to get to me, and they'd try to like, you know, I never, if I lost a match, I would always show, humility and shake the kid's hand, walk off like a sports, like like you should. But
Mm-hmm.
in the sense of dealing with those emotions and dealing with those outlashes, where I'd literally like turn around, I'd be like, shut up, like to some coaches, some fans, like I would get so mad, and then finally, like my junior senior year, I really started to address those things, meant like to myself, that I needed to overcome those, and not, a lot of people were telling me, good influences in my life too, saying, listen, you can't let these things get to you, and people can see that they're getting to you, and they use that. And so I started just working on myself, and not letting those things get to me, and just putting it into my training, putting it into everything else. And I think that really showed. And then receiving that award was like almost like, hey, like all this was recognized. Even if it wasn't, it was for me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's powerful that, one of the things that stood out in the film was just how, you know, your temper was so strong, and you would outlash. And that was one of the things your coaches said was like the one way someone could beat you was
Exactly.
get inside your head. And it's so crazy because it's like, you're just a high school kid, but the sportsmanship award is a way for someone to recognize that you've almost gotten around that temper and been able to harness it in a way. So did you also feel that?
Exactly. Yes, 100%. Like with that getting in my head thing, it's like you said, I was in high school. Like, why does that have to be the thing? Like, why do adults in my life have to formulate these plans to get in my head so their kids who aren't physically better than me can beat me? So by me messing up and getting, loose and temper and like stuff like that. So I was my biggest enemy. Like I was my worst opponent every time. Like I was in my head all the time, and it was something I had to battle a lot.
Hmm. Now, switching gears kind of, you've blown up on TikTok. I think you have over 400,000 followers, something like that. And you've struck a chord with people. And I'm curious why you think you've just catapulted in the TikTok world.
All right, so I will correct you, because I don't want to. I wish it was 400 whatever followers, but we started 2.5 weeks ago, and we went from like 30 followers to 25 or like 24K right now, and
24K.
which is still in my mind such extreme rapid growth, where I'm like, wow, like people are that interested in my story and stuff. So 2.5 weeks ago, I did a video, like I had all these videos put up from the tour where we were going around the country, just of me playing in these different spots, where Kelly just took like 10-second clips and put them up just so I had content there. But we weren't getting any hits, and like we weren't trying to really. And finally we get home, and we start working on stuff, start studying some stuff like algorithms and just different social media platforms, and make this video introducing myself, saying I'm Anthony Ferraro. Like I look pretty normal, right? And like I'm like, there's one thing different about me. Like I'm blind, and it's I show up with my cane, and then it's like, but I wrestle or surf, skateboard, do judo, and like show all these things. And I go to sleep, it has like 100 views. Wake up, it has 35,000 views, and I have like 900 followers, and I'm like, what the hell happened? And Kelly's like, you went viral. And I was like, oh, is that what that is? And all these people like sending all these like wonderful messages and stuff. And then, we continued to put more content out and getting all these hits. Like we had a video hit like 750,000 views, and like about me explaining my braille writer, me talking about how I skateboard while I'm skateboarding, got like 550K views. Like, and then, you know, the followers just kept coming. And it's funny because with all this rapid growth and like, I finally like, it's more trying to put myself out there, be more vulnerable to people on the internet, because I only give you so much on certain platforms, and I'm trying to like just be totally transparent, and got such a, you know, positive response. But while that's happening, you have all these people, it brings it all right back to like high school wrestling and stuff, where it's like, you're not blind, like how are you blind, you're not blind, how are you responding to comments, like you're not blind, like you can't skateboard if you're blind, like all this stuff. And it was just like, it was just funny. And like I refuse to be negative like with that, because I'm trying to just spread positivity on these platforms. I'm trying to educate, inspire, motivate, and just like, you know, help as many people as possible that need it. And, you know, I respond to these comments like, just try and educate, like, oh, I am blind. And like, even the other day, we actually did a video of me dropping in on the half pipe blindfolded. I'm like, I had to do it, you guys, like, believe me. And it's just been fun, but also, you know, just dealing with those comments, but trying to keep it going. And, you know, it's obviously rapid growth, but what do you do with that and how do you keep it going is the main concern. But just keep riding with that. And Kelly kept telling me, I've wanted a dog for a long time, and Kelly told me if I hit 10,000 followers on something or wrote a song, I could get a dog. And I hit 20,000 followers and wrote 2 songs. And on Valentine's Day, she brailled me out a letter saying she adopted us a puppy. So I'm like, so like that's the next thing coming up too, is you have to go pick up my dog on Sunday, and I'm so excited about that.
Wow.
So that was a cool kind of accomplishment in the growth, you know, thinking like 3 weeks ago, I'm like, oh, I'm never gonna hit 10,000 followers, like this is never gonna happen. And then like a week later at 15,000 followers, I'm like, what? You know,
Yeah.
it was really cool. It's just
and
cool to see. I'm trying to reach the younger generation too, and like you have to make pivots to be a parent in this world. So like no one's gonna know if you don't put yourself out there, and you have to just keep going. And even if content's not doing well at first, we've been building content for the past 3 years, so we've like almost been preparing for this moment. And you know, something she kept telling me that I repeat to myself every day now is something from you actually, about the a library of content is way more valuable than one viral moment. And sorry if that's wrong, but
no, it's right.
So that has resonated so much that we've just been building and building this library of content, you know, YouTube, Instagram, and all this stuff. And you see the slow trickle, like things are starting to pick up a little bit here and there. And it's like, even if it's not rapid, it's still growth, and it's still happening. Like over the last week, 2 weeks as well, I've gained like, I'm really proud of, because it's all organic as well. And you know, gaining Instagram followers is like really hard right now. I don't know why, but I've gained like 500 followers in the past like 2.5 weeks, or I want to say month. And that was like a real big accomplishment, I think.
Well, congratulations. And that's exactly what I say. And the thing is, it's like in 3 years, when everyone knows who you are, it's going to be like, because you've been putting out content for the past 6 years, do they say, oh, wow, now I can go check him out and see what he's done 3 years ago? And it gives you way more opportunities for people to really find you. And with the 440,000 followers, it was actually likes. You've been liked 400.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. And also this will be going out in March. So by the time it goes out in March, maybe you will be at 440,000 followers.
You never know.
Exactly. Yeah. So what advice would you mentioned that you've been putting out content for the past 3 years, or building a library for the past 3 years. What advice would you give someone who's putting out content for the first time, is maybe in their first few weeks of doing that? What advice do you have for that person?
I think it's important. What do you want out of putting your content out? Like, who do you want to be? Like, who are you, first of all? What is your product, or are you your product? Are you what you're trying to market? And, you know, I think it's important to give your why and give your story. You know, what brought you to this point? Not just show up one day and expect all these people to just follow you because you did all this stuff. You need to introduce these people have no idea who you are. And you know, if you want to go that route, you need to be, it sucks because you have to be vulnerable sometimes, like
Hmm.
to show who you are. And that really resonates with people, you know, being vulnerable, being in front of the camera, opposed to just, you know, pictures and stuff. I think is a big thing, you know, hearing your voice, hearing you talk, uh, engaging. That's huge. If you're engaging, you need to be engaging with your audience. That every follower matters. Every person who comments matters because they're all helping you get to your next goal.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's the mindset that I've tried to embody with this podcast as well. So how do you practically like start responding to comments? I know you had a TikTok video about it, but talk about how you respond to comments and how you interact and engage with people who follow you.
Yeah, so it's a full-time job at this point. It's really hard. I do the absolute best I can because it matters to me. I have every iPhone has an app or has an accessibility feature in the settings called VoiceOver, and it reads out the screen. And what I do is I go to the comment, I read the comment with the voiceover. Like the whole time my phone's reading what's going on the screen. And if I want to select something, I double tap it. And if I want to like move to the next item, I just swipe right or left.
Mhm.
And uh I go into reply on the comment, and either I'll type it out on the keyboard or I'll just do voice to text, like voice to speech or text, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'll do that and just reply to each comment. And then sometimes when I'm getting too overwhelmed, I'll sit with Kelly and she'll read comments to me, and then I'll tell her what to write.
Yeah, that sounds like a good strategy as well.
Yeah.
So finally, before we wrap it up, you know, what message do you want someone who watches A Shot in the Dark to come away with?
Well, first of all, I just want to say that like A Shot in the Dark is a complete love story in my eyes, because it was filmed by my brother Oliver, who, you know, he was my older brother, my big brother. He's a big inspiration in my life, and he like captured all of this in my life, my entire senior year of high school wrestling, dealing with adversity, overcoming challenges. And you know, he believed so much in me, in what I was doing, and that people needed to see it, that he captured all of this, all independently filmed, out of pocket, with a partner. And you know, 2 years later, when the first 15 minutes of the film gets put together and he's going to watch it, he passes away the day before, and he never gets to see any of it. And it was just like a huge blow. And after that, you know, Chris, the partner, came, and he he came to the funeral and vowed to me, basically saying like, whatever it takes, I'm finishing this film, like for your brother and for you. And he did just that in the next year and a half. And we had to raise money on Kickstarter. So he put the trailer and explaining what it was like how the story behind it. And he put like $30,000 for the month, and we ended up raising that in like 4 days and 6 hours, and then raising
Hmm.
like $87,000 at the end of the month. And we finished the film, and it's like a beautiful film, like, you know, basically it's a gift from my brother and Chris for me. And it if this film could help one person, that's my goal in life. Like, you know, if you can getting what you could get out of this film is like, you know, there's life challenges, life sucks sometimes, and like it's real, and like there's raw moments in your life where you want to give up, and like you just need to understand that it's not an option like to give up. You have to keep moving forward. You have to, you know, and you're not going to be able to do everything in life you're by yourself. Like if you look back to my film, I had a team of people that were constantly in my ear and pushing me because they believed in me. And you need to find those people in your life, because you can't do it alone. And you know, it's important to have a team. You know, you're not going to go anywhere just by yourself, solo, with no one. And you know, I know so many people. Last thing I want to add is just so many people ask me like, what's it like doing these things with a disability, blah blah blah. And I'm like, my answer blank is, the only disability is a bad attitude. Because in life I know people that are sitting at home feeling sorry for themselves, have nothing wrong with them, you know, physically, they're just making excuses. Oh, I need to get a job, blah, blah. Then go get one. Like there's this, you can do that. And I know people in wheelchairs that people would see them on the street saying, oh, you know, poor blah, blah, blah in a wheelchair. That person, when you don't see them out on the street, they're literally trying to climb mountains in the, like literally I've seen it. I've been there. Like there's people in wheelchairs trying to climb mountains, like they climbing mountains, not trying, like doing whatever it takes, rock climbing, doing all these things. And in life, you don't have to do, you know, you don't have to be crazy. You don't have to be a person in a wheelchair climbing mountains, but it's like, what's your mountain that you want to climb in life, and just do it. And it takes, you know, that first step, just getting up, and that's all you have to do.
That's exactly what the poster of the podcast is about. The logo is a man looking up at a mountain, and you embody that so tremendously. I want to also give my deepest condolences about your brother and ask you, how does one deal with the emotional loss like that, and how do you move forward?
You know, thank you, first of all. And that's a great question, because if you find the answer, if there's a clear answer, I'll take it. But I've just learned through my experiences that, you know, you'll never get that why. Like, why did this happen? You'll never really fully get that why. But you know, loss is a normal part of life, and it's gonna happen, and it's a cycle of life. But we need to understand, you know, that person's still with us, and like it's our job to keep them alive through memories, through stories. And they're I fully believe in everything I do that my brother's with me, like all my traveling, all my competing. Like he set me up to do all this. I'm like, you're an asshole, because now I'm left here trying to figure all this shit out, and like you just left me no roadmap, really, you know. He's like, here, I gave you all the tools, you make the map. And it was like, but why couldn't we talk about it, you know? That drives me crazy sometimes. Like it literally will drive you crazy. And my advice for that person that gets in that deep rut too, of like that full dark hole of, you know, why isn't this person here? Like it's almost like this, you know, burning urge to just touch that person one more time, to just talk to them one more time, do anything with them one more time. And like it literally will drive a person insane if they completely go down that rabbit hole. Like I believe that you could go mentally insane. So I can't stress hard enough, when you're having those days, that it's okay to sit there and, you know, grieve, like feel that sadness, feel the anger, feel the emotions behind it in a healthy way, in a safe space. But it's important after grieving, you know, give yourself a little time, but don't spend days in that grief, and get up and walk outside. And even if it's cold out, bundle up, just get outside, and, you know, just breathe in the air, be thankful that you're here, and just enjoy life, and just try to be present now, and not obsess over the past or cry over the future. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And thank you for giving your input. Finally, the last question I have for you is, what advice do you have for someone who's pursuing the highest version of themselves, whether that's mentally, physically, spiritually? What advice do you have to that person?
My advice is set your goals higher than you could ever imagine, that you ever believed yourself, you know, getting to. Set your goals through the moon, because if you fall short, you're right on the moon, and that's where you're supposed to be. And you know, I set my goals so high in life, like they're almost on, like, you know, the people will be like, that's not like realistic. And I'm like, really? Because if I miss this goal, then I'm going to be right here, and that's where I care about being. So like I can't get there if I don't shoot to be there. So like always shoot past where you're trying to be, because you're going to get too comfortable sometimes.
I absolutely love it. Anthony, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Where can people find you if they want more Anthony Ferraro in their life?
Oh, thank you so much, Danny. It's a pleasure being here. You could find me at asfvision.com, and it has all my links there to A Shot in the Dark on Amazon Prime. It's going to be on iTunes soon. It probably will be by the time this is put out. And then also, you know, there's my TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, everything's there, podcast, blah, blah, blah. So asfvision.com. And Danny, it's really been a pleasure. I can't thank you enough for having me on here. So thank you for your time.
My pleasure. And those links will all be in the show notes at dannymiranda.com/podcast as well. And thank you, Anthony. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.